Quite a lot of people registered for this. Someone from Germany, someone from India. Quite a lot of people registered for this. We have almost 500 people who registered for this webinar. We very rarely get that many, but a lot of people, I hope, will end up watching this. Someone from DPS, Shalini, hello to you at DPS and your fantastic exhibition event the other day, which I had great pleasure in being a part of. Okay, all right, so let's get started. Let me share my screen and we'll kick this thing off. Okay, so all right, so here we go. So today's webinar, as you know, is focusing on real life situations, real life issues, real life events, real life experiences. Call it what you will. It's a very important part to me. It's the reason why I think TOK is so wonderful, and I'm going to try and explain why I think that. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will have more of an idea of how real life situations support the delivery of TOK concepts and how they might play a role in the two assessment tasks, the exhibition and the essay. And hopefully I'll be throwing a lot more into it than just that. So let's just go through and I'll introduce you to what we're going to be looking at today. So first of all, just a quick outline of what real life situations are. Perhaps you're new to TOK. Perhaps you have a very good idea, but you want to get someone else's perspective on it, and why they merit their own webinar. Why am I delivering this hour-long webinar on real life situations? And hopefully I'll be able to explain why it is I think they're so important. I'd like to just quickly go over what makes an effective real life situation, some of the rules that that we should follow and our students should follow to draw on really acceptable and powerful real life situations. I want to try and pitch this idea that real life situations are central to TOK and say why. Then we'll have a look at the role that real life situations play in the TOK assessments, in the essay and the exhibition. But I think real life situations do a lot more than that. I think we can use them to integrate TOK with the rest of the diploma program. I think we can use them to market TOK to different audiences, and I'll talk about which ones those are in the 7th part of this webinar. And then finally, just a few, or penultimately, just a few ideas about how to keep up to date with real life situations. And then the last bit, just an outline of the support that we provide with a focus on real life situations. Okay, so first of all, just a quick outline of how we will do this. The webinar will take about an hour. I often overrun. We'll see how we do. We may take some questions at the end. If you haven't attended one of these webinars before, and I do seem to have quite a few new names, so that's fantastic. My name is Michael Dunn, the creator of theoryofknowledge.net. Questions and contributions. I love questions. I love feedback. I love ideas from you. I learn so much, as I'm sure you do with your students, but when I'm delivering something like this, or when I'm delivering a class, I end up learning probably more than the audience. So I'd love to have your feedback on how you use real life situations and how you feel about the ideas that I've expressed during the webinar. So these can come in the webinar, towards the end of the webinar, via the chat or the Q&A section. Actually, Q&A section is really good because I've just discovered that I can actually download them, whereas the chat sort of disappears. And I often have a load of great questions in the chat, and then the webinar ends and they all disappear. So the Q&A I can actually download later on. So probably that's the best place to send your questions. Or if you want to wait until afterwards, you can just send me an email. I'm very easily contactable, either via the site, or I'll be sending out a debrief email, and you can reply to that with more ideas if you want. The debrief email will include a link to the video recording. It will include the presentation that you are looking at right now, and it will include a few responses to the things that we have discussed and questions that you might have sent. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like today, this morning. Let's begin with just an outline of what real life situations are. So real life situations are events, issues, stories, and experiences with a specific world context, a specific real world context. Specific, that word appears a lot more now. I'm sure you will have noticed in the TOK guide, you've got to be specific. In the exhibition, it's very important. The more specific your objects are, not quite the same as a real life situation, but your objects, the more specific they are, the easier they are to handle. And I think the same thing can be said for real life situations. I think the word specific is quite helpful because it gets us away from hypothetical examples, hypothetical situations which we don't like. It gets us away from sort of anecdotal situations, again, which we don't like. We like concrete, real situations that we can put a place and a time on, and we can say who it involved. Okay. Real life situations, excuse me, it's worth saying can be any level. This is certainly what I tell my students. They can be experiences that they've had on a personal level. They can be local. They can be regional. They can be global. You know, they can be any level. And I think it's worth saying that to your students, because sometimes they feel that real life situations maybe are always sort of news events, and that's definitely not the case. You know, that's why we call them, I think, situations rather than events. You know, they are issues, they are sometimes ideas, they're sometimes debates, they're sometimes, you know, not just an event that is reported in a news site. Real life situations, as the well, it does say this in the guide, they provide us with the context for our questions about knowledge. Okay, so less so in the new syllabus, we extract knowledge questions, but I think they prompt us to ask questions, and they link the world out there to the TOK world, to our concepts, to our ideas, to our course, to our areas of knowledge, and to all the other sort of ideas that we deal with in TOK. So in other words, we go from the real world into TOK, but we also go the other way around. We go from the TOK world, our concepts, our ideas, our claims, and we use real life situations to justify and explore what we are saying and what we are arguing and the opinions that we have. So it works both way around. It's a kind of circular relationship. I think as well, and this is going to lead me on to my kind of main thesis about how important real life situations are. I think they validate the course. I think they make it what it is. I think they make it relevant. I think they demonstrate to students why we are doing this course. They demonstrate to other teachers why we are doing this course, why TOK is such a powerful tool, developing such incredibly important skills, because we need to be constantly linking what we do with the real world, with real life situations, and with the most up-to-date contemporary things going on in the world. So the fact that they play an important role, I think, shows why this is such a brilliant course, and why it's worth doing. So for me, they're very, very central to the course. They drive my lessons, they drive my course, as I'm going to show you, and they just make it such a fantastic experience for everyone involved in it, and that's why I think they merit their own webinar, and me going on about them for an hour or so of your time. I want to return to an idea that I mentioned in the last webinar. Was it the last webinar, or was it the webinar before that? I gave a webinar on knowledge heroes. I don't think it was the last one, it was the one before that, when I talked about some of the key thinkers who I think can be drawn on in the TOK course. I've got a link there on the presentation if you didn't see that, which will take you through to that webinar. And I talked about something which I refer to as unfiltered knowledge. And this is another thing that informs the way I teach course, I teach TOK, and the way I structure my units and resource my course. I think as much as possible, we should be sending students out into the real world and into the kind of agencies that report on the real world, be they kind of media sources, big media sources, or social media sources, or eyewitnesses, or anyone who is directly involved in things going on in the world. So I think TOK offers us a massive opportunity here to not offer students kind of pre-packaged ideas, conveniently sort of divided up for them, either from a website or from a textbook. I think as much as possible, we should be sending students out to watch videos and articles, being connected to the news itself, seeing eyewitnesses, and forming their own interpretations. Okay, so rather than having someone say to them, this is why that was important, this is what the implications of that will be, etc., etc., they can decide as much as possible for themselves. And I think TOK as well, we're not just looking at these real life situations directly as a kind of primary source. We're also looking at the important secondary sources. As it says there, TOK can be a sort of exercise in media studies, learning how stories are spun sometimes by news agencies and social media platforms and so on. What's going on in Australia right now, the battle between Facebook and the Australian government is a kind of example of that. So I want my students to be not even looking at my website, not looking at text, but I want them out there. I want them reading stories, watching the news, seeing the world as much as they possibly can for themselves, and also drawing on their own experiences, things that they have actually experienced firsthand, the empirical sort of approach to knowledge. So this is the second sort of part of this plea of mine to get our students involved in unfiltered knowledge. And as I say, follow that link to see how they should also connect with the thinkers and the concepts in as unfiltered a way as is possible. That was part one. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right, so we've got some idea of what a real life situation is, some idea of the potential of real life situation. So what makes a great real life situation? I not so long ago tried to summarize what makes a great real life situation. Obviously, students ask, other teachers ask, and I began to sort of compile a sort of list of characteristics that they should have, and they ended up all being and then it became a slightly contrived. Perhaps I couldn't make them all begin with R, but I've done my best to try and get to that. So there are 7 characteristics here, all beginning with R or having an R in there somewhere, that I think summarize what makes a great real life situation. So first of all, they've got to be real. Okay, and that sounds sort of obvious, but real as opposed to, as I've said, hypothetical. We don't like hypothetical examples. It was the one thing that really frustrated me when I was at university doing philosophy, that you could prove anything via a hypothetical example, and even the hypothetical examples that were sort of reasonable and viable and possible still probably didn't happen, and sometimes they were really far-fetched. The trolley tram that goes and rams into people, for example, has that ever actually happened? I'd be interested if it has, but I don't think so. We're never in that situation where we have to choose between that guy over there and those people over there. It's kind of a fun activity, but it's not true. So we need our real life situations to be real, first of all. They should be relevant. In other words, they should align with what we are exploring, be it an area of knowledge, be it a theme, be it an essay. So make sure that they are not too kind of off the track of what we're figuring out. They should be relevant to the argument that we're offering, relevant to the claim that we are making. So very, very important that. They should require, this is where it got slightly more difficult with the art. So require us to ask questions. So do they prompt us to ask knowledge questions? Do we want to find out more about these real life situations? And I think when we're, well, previously the presentation, that's where this sort of becomes relevant. Choosing a great real life situation is always about what questions does it lead on to. But I still think that that's the case, even though we're not doing the presentation anymore. The real life situations that you choose for lessons, maybe the real life situations that you put into your essay, maybe ones that you reference in the exhibition. Do they prompt us to ask more? If they do, then they're interesting. If they do, then they're suitable for TOK. do they have a far-reaching scope? So, are they significant? Are they something that affects all of us, or are they really, really obscure and only applicable to a small group of people, or one tiny little subset of philosophers or physicists? That's not to say that those kind of real life situations can't work, but the best ones, I think, are the ones that we can all relate to, that we can all understand, that don't require too much in the way of interpretation in order for us to get them. Do they have a reliable provenance? So can we trust where they come from? Now, sometimes the point of the real life situation is that it is not from a reliable provenance, which makes it a little more complicated. But yeah, sometimes that's the point. This media source spinning the news in such a way that it becomes completely unreliable and invalid. But for the most part, we are getting our real life situations from good media sources that we can trust, and are perhaps supported by other media sources. So we can sort of fact check them. I like recent real life situations. I mean, they don't all, of course, have to be recent. Some of the ideas, some of the thinkers, some of the situations that I look at in my own course are ancient. We mentioned Socrates, we mentioned Plato, we mentioned Kant, we mentioned Mill, etc., etc. And obviously they refer to events and issues and things that went on hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of years ago. But for me, the best real life situations are the ones that have just happened, things that are going on in the world right now. I think they're more original. I think they again, as I've said, that idea of validation, I think they show that TOK is not just a sort of dusty philosophy course. It is something that is very much, it belongs in the world right now, right today. And again, something that your students will appreciate. Are they relatable? I mean this more with real life situations that are perhaps experiences that the students have had themselves. We all have these experiences. Now, if it's a really kind of esoteric experience that only you can understand, then perhaps that's not going to be a great real life situation. Perhaps the rest of us won't quite sort of sympathize and empathize with what you experienced and what you thought and the questions that it prompted. So I think as much as possible, a great real life situation should be something that we can all relate to, that is a kind of universal experience that we might have all had, or have all read about, or are all familiar with. So those are 7 things that I think make a real life situation a great one, all beginning with R. I hope I didn't take that too far, but I think that works. That's what I give to my students, and that's what I say. These are the characteristics that work and make it quite powerful. Okay, so as I've said, I think real life situations should be central to TOK, and by that I mean, when I am designing my lessons, I often start with the real life situation. I see something going on in the world, and I think that would make a great lesson, rather than the other way around. Okay, so you can start with, right, we'll start with, we're going to explore history. Maybe we'll look at this idea in history. Now let's find a real life situation that will work for that. I often go the other way, and I see a real life situation that I want to put into my course. Then I go out, well, how does it relate to TOK? What kind of concepts can we use it for, and so on. And I think the best way of demonstrating this is to give a little example. So from the picture, you can see some protesters there. They are people who are protesting against lockdowns and masks and things like that. And that fascinates me. This idea that you feel that your own intuitive knowledge is better than the scientific community's, and maybe it's sort of, it has something to do with your ideas of liberty. Maybe you've got some kind of political agenda there. Maybe you've got some kind of religious agenda. Who knows what could be the reason? But it's something that I'm interested in. Now, I think, in TOK, we try to be sophisticated. We try to teach our our students to be sophisticated, and I think a lot of them will have a very quick reaction to that, and they will just accuse these people of being sort of lunatics, or being, conspiracy nuts, and I think that's the kind of thing that we really want to avoid. We want to develop a true understanding of what makes people tick. We want to make it, we want to prompt our students to ask much more sophisticated, advanced questions. We want, above all, nuance. We want nuanced thinking. Okay, so I've got kind of two agendas there. Number one, to understand these people, because I think it's an interesting idea with big implications, as we've seen. And number two, let's try and do it in a way that's really sophisticated and nuanced. So how does that look? So I start with my real life situation in step one, and I'm going to relate that. To the unit that I want to explore. Now, if you're familiar with my my way of delivering TOK, we don't do it via areas of knowledge or themes. We do it via big questions, which is a much more conceptual approach. And within each unit, within each big question, we look at a combination of areas of knowledge and themes. Sometimes a core theme as well, all kind of combined. So this real life situation for me links most closely to my big question on perspectives. And it's obviously relevant to the natural sciences, and who is a kind of expert when it comes to making these decisions about ways to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus. I think it also relates to knowledge in the knower, us as knowers. What do we use as the sources of our knowledge? Which do we go with our gut? I really don't want to wear a mask. It feels wrong. I think my feelings towards liberty are much stronger than these strange scientists that are telling me what to do, etc., etc. And I think it also aligns to other aspects of the. I mean, you could almost relate it to everything, right? But I think it often relates to our political affiliations. It often relates to our religious affiliations. I think language is in there as well. I think technology as well, spreads these ideas via social media. So actually, you could link it to a lot of different aspects of the course. So that's my first step, and at that point, I'm thinking this is definitely going to work. This is going to be a great real life situation to look at. It's going to work very, very well in TOK. Then step two, we might think about what other real life situations it could link to. So I would link this idea that we are skeptical about lockdowns. I'd link that to other anti-establishment beliefs. For example, people who are anti-vaccination, which is another very topical idea at the moment, of course, and maybe also flat earthers, which perhaps is a little bit of a cliche, but I still find endlessly fascinating. So then step three, what kind of concepts and skills do I want to bring into this lesson and this unit that I'm covering? Well, like I say, that idea of nuanced thinking. Okay, I want to promote the idea of nuanced thinking. I want to avoid my students just jumping to a judgment really about what makes these people tick and what kind of fosters this way of thinking. For some of them, that will come quite naturally. You'll be able to get them to sort of put the brakes on their own sort of instinctive reactions to what they're seeing. But for others, maybe this idea of nuance will be something new. The idea that we don't just see the world in black and white. There are often lots of reasons behind a particular way of thinking, and giving them that concept of nuance is a very, very empowering one. And it's one that's going to really, really help us, or help them to become more sophisticated thinkers. Step four, then we need to kind of put it together into a lesson. Again, if you're familiar with the way that I deliver TOK, then all of my lessons are delivered via a presentation, quite well structured, with a well, hopefully very well structured, with a starter question, with a little bit more information that they can digest, then some activities for them to do either in pairs or in groups, and then we lead up to the sort of the exit question, which gives us the ability to check for understanding in a clear and well-aligned way. Um, so I mean, as I'll say later on, I publish the newsletter, and that gives me access to loads and loads of articles and videos and things. And you know, this topic obviously comes up a lot, and I've got quite a lot of really good videos and articles about this way of thinking. Some often quite judgmental, but some doing what I want to do, which is think about this topic in a nuanced way. Then we put together the lesson, making sure that we link it to the rest of the unit. And this is what we get. If I just click on that, I can take you through to that. So that's the lesson. I should also say, to have a catchy title, I think, is always a very important thing. So navigating the post-truth landscape, which is the word navigation, I think, quite important to TOK. How, you know, it's mentioned in the TOK guide, how to navigate the world, and the post-truth landscape is taken from one of the videos that I use. So we have a sort of simple starter question there that will hopefully prompt students to give a quite straightforward answer. You know, you see in the notes there the kind of things that we might get quite disparaging comments about this, which is what I want to kind of rein in. We introduce the idea of nuance, and you know, you might ask them if they think they are nuanced thinkers. You can see there that I link this later to a later lesson. We link it also to the TOK essay. These are the kind of things that we're trying to do. You know, writing your TOK essay has got to be a nuanced piece of work. So, you know, this gives them a clear idea that this is an important concept, not just to understand the world, but actually to complete the bigger of the two assessment tasks. And then we've got a few activities for them to do. This is a great Guardian video. It's really moving, actually, this video. It looks at often the personal stories behind people that have these conspiracy theories, and you can see the reason from their own personal lives why they've developed these ideas. There's a great article there about anti-vaxxers, again, taking a very nuanced approach, showing you that we shouldn't look at this in a kind of homogenous way. There are lots of different reasons for being reluctant to take vaccinations, sometimes very poor reasons, sometimes very strong reasons. And then we get to the thing that I wanted to explore in the first place, which is an article and a video about the quarantine protesters. And you can see in red that I'm linking these ideas to the 12 key concepts of TOK, which I think are really useful kind of scaffolding for our understanding, and you know, they should be used as much as possible in lessons and by students. And then eventually we come to our exit task, with a nice quote taken from the first video, and the role of being a nuanced thinker, which I hope sort of makes this, gives it kind of higher purpose almost, this lesson. Okay, so going back to our presentation. So that's a single lesson, and I do try to do that for every lesson that I teach. I mean, sometimes, of course, you know, your priority is something specific to the TOK course. You know, you've got to do something on the essay, you've got to do something on the exhibition. So, you know, you start with that, or, you know, you feel that you haven't perhaps covered one of the areas of knowledge in enough detail. So you look at that first, and then you come to your real life situations. But for the most part, I am driven by real life situations, because I think that's what makes lessons, and it's what makes units interesting for students and for everyone else we're trying to sell TOK to. Okay, so let's think about real life situations in the assessment task. So first of all, the exhibition, and let's just remind ourselves of what the guide says and what the assessment tool says. So the overall assessment task of the exhibition is to show how TOK manifests in the world around us. Okay, so clearly we're dealing with the real world. The real world via these objects. I mean, as we know, they can exist digitally, but they are things of the world. They are not just concepts. They're not just ideas. They belong in the real world. Students' objects have to have a specific real world context. I said that at the beginning of the lesson. So as specific as possible, it makes it easier for them to talk about them, perhaps link them to themselves and them as knowers, and also to the themes, which is the recommended context for writing the commentary. Choice of objects must be strongly justified. I think this is where you have an opportunity to refer to real life situations. You can talk about the importance of an object, perhaps in relation to a real life situation, to an issue going on in the world, to the production of knowledge. Points made in the exhibition commentary should be well supported with appropriate evidence. Again, I think we're talking about evidence that comes from the real world, real life situations, issues that they've read about. I think the exhibition, more than the essay, is about personal experiences. It's about them as knowers. I do think it's hard to avoid creating an exhibition that isn't related very closely to the core theme, to knowledge and the knower. So I think perhaps the level of the real life situation might be sort of more personal than within the essay. But these should have our characteristics of, our 7 characteristics of what a really good real life situation is. So that's how I think it aligns to the exhibition. I think maybe it's even easier in the essay to talk about real life situations. So again, the overall assessment task of the essay is to offer a clear, coherent, and critical analysis of the title. Arguments in the essay should be effectively supported by specific examples. So again, that word specific, examples I think should be real world examples. The teacher notes, if you've read the TOK teacher notes, they do actually talk about what that means. We're talking about specific thinkers. We're talking about specific events. We're not talking about generic ideas. We're trying to make it as real as possible, have a real world setting. Implications of arguments should also be considered. I think when you're looking at the implications, you are relating things to events, you're relating things to ways in which knowledge is produced, and these could be, of course, real life situations. I think there's a danger though, I'm such a fan of real life situations, and I have been guilty in the past of driving real life situations so much that my students have sometimes created essays that have been sort of just a description of kind of various case studies. They've been a victim of my own success. They've been so excited by certain real life situations that that's really what they've wanted to talk about in their essay, rather than discussing their claims, their arguments, their counterclaims, their counter arguments. They've wanted to just rush into their real life situations because they're so proud of what they've managed to find, be it their own experiences or other things they've read about. And you've got to kind of calm them down and say, hang on a sec, the real life situation there, or the examples that you've got there, should be supporting your argument. They should be supporting your opinion, supporting your assertion, rather than replacing it. And if you do that, then the essay just becomes this descriptive piece of work, which of course we don't want. We want analysis. So, they need to be very, very clear that the real life situations are there to support their ideas, not kind of be the ideas. So I think that's important to get across to the students. I've mentioned in other workshops that one way of doing this is when they sort of offer their argument or offer their claim, they try to reference the idea of a key thinker, of someone who's an idea not from them, but from someone else. And this forces them to discuss it in a theory of knowledge way, rather than just jumping straight into a description of their real life situation. So that's one little trick that maybe you can use with your students. Okay, so that looks at the role of real life situations within the TOK course. Hopefully I've kind of tried to I've managed to persuade you that they are crucial, they are central, they are brilliant, they are what sort of gives the course its soul, but they serve other purposes as well that I think are very, very important. And here I think, you know, this is really, really important, and this is always being talked about by TOK coordinators and DP coordinators. You know, how do you integrate TOK with the rest of the DP? I've got a lot of resources on the site that help us to do this. None, I think, are as important as the TOK newsletter, which I publish every month, and you can sign up to a free one if you haven't already, or if you remember, you will be getting the premium newsletter. The newsletters, I think, they're a great way of helping us to integrate what we do in TOK with the rest of the DP, with other subjects. You know, because every real life situation that we look at can link to other subjects, and you know, not only do they enliven and make our own subject TOK more exciting and more relatable and more relevant, they can also help other subjects to do that. And hopefully other teachers will realize, you know, that rather than being this really, really weird, strange course that they don't want to get involved in, TOK actually is the means to make their own subjects more relevant to the real world and give them the framework to unpack news stories and experiences and issues going on that you know, work in their subject. So I'm not going to carry on going there. Here are some examples. You can follow these examples. These are things that I found over the last few weeks. They're very, very relevant. The AP article, which I've tried not to use the word of the former president of the United States of America, but it's all about the way in which he did or did not encourage his followers to go and smash up the Congress. I still can't quite believe that happened, but it's the word fight, okay? And this is a great article examining what that word means and how it can be interpreted in different ways according to what your perspectives are. So this is obviously great for us in TOK because it relates to language, it relates to politics, but it also relates, of course, to language acquisition. It could be used in global politics. It could be used in a lot, actually, of Group 3 subjects. So it's a story that could be used in lots of different subjects. The second one is a Guardian article about, this is a very recent case where a Polish person was accused of collaborating with the Nazis during the Second World War, and his family, his descendants, have sued the historians who made that claim, and they have won their case. So the historians have to they have to pay anything. They're not going to be imprisoned or anything, but they have to apologize. This is going to have huge implications for the way in which we write history, because if we start suing historians for making these claims, we are going to have problems perhaps creating objective evidence. So that obviously relates to history, but I think it relates to all of Group 3. It's a story about evidence. You know, is historical evidence stronger than legal evidence, or is legal evidence stronger than historical evidence? So it could get some really, really good discussions going. The third one there, Financial Times article, which talks about, again, the COVID-19 pandemic, and it talks about the limits of science. It talks about how science has been incredibly helpful. It talks about what science sometimes cannot do. The word I think that is most associated with this article is certainty, and anyone who studies science knows that it's not about certainty. It's about the best hypothesis, and science obviously develops as time goes on, and our ideas about COVID have massively changed over the last year or so as we've been studying it, and that is the strength of science rather than the weakness of science. But that's not how some people see it, particularly those who want to use it as a kind of a political weapon. You know, they say we need to be sure about the science before we come to this conclusion. Well, you're never sure. You're never 100% certain. But that's not how science works. So this is a great story for looking at any of the Group 4 subjects: chemistry, biology, sports and health science. You know, it's a really nice article. The fifth one there related to mathematics. Again, sorry, COVID, can't escape it. Looks at the new variant of COVID, and it discusses in mathematical terms why it's so dangerous. And one of the best stories I've read about COVID was at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was all about the maths of how it spreads, and you can almost understand everything by maths when it comes to COVID-19. You know, we were trying to say it's just as dangerous as flu, or some people were. It's just as dangerous as flu. It's not any different from that. When you look at the mathematics, you realize, oh my goodness, this is a very different thing indeed. So that's a really nice story. And then finally, there's this very interesting debate that we're interested in TOK related to ethics and values. You know, how do we deal with artists who have led a rather dissolute, immoral kind of life? You know, can we still celebrate their work? Now, this references quite a few examples of artists right now. I think the one in the news that I keep reading about is Woody Allen. On the one hand, the creator of some of the funniest, most brilliant films. On the other hand, quite hard to reconcile that with his personal life. So, you know, there are loads of artists that you can use for that. It's great, therefore, for Group 6 subjects, and it's great for us in TOK. So these are stories that have all featured in the TOK newsletter that I publish. You know, I hope that, you know, this excites other subject teachers rather than turns them off TOK. You know, I don't know how, you know, I don't know how your school works in terms of communication. You know, whether you could whether you could mention this in a staff meeting, whether there's a board that you can put it on. In my own school, I've emailed teachers. You know, you can easily send them the newsletter and pick out some of the key stories that you're looking at. I think it's much better coming from me personally, and I try and kind of I try to engage other teachers in conversation and refer to these things, and often they do it to you if they're really interesting stories. So, you know, it's all about getting their interest. It's all about showing them that TOK is about real life situations, is about what's going on in the world. It's not this strange conceptual abstract subject at all. It's very practical, excuse me, and it's very much a course that allows students to make sense of the world. Okay, I think another really important part of our job is marketing TOK, not just to teachers. Well, I mentioned teachers there, but obviously to our students and even to parents, which I think is sometimes not kind of taken in. Hang on, I'm just going to move myself over to the other side. There we go. So, you know, who are we trying to pitch TOK to? Obviously, we're trying to pitch it to the students. Real life situations make the course relevant. They make the course engaging. They make it interesting. You know, and remember, real life situations can be their experiences. It can be what they have seen and heard and learned inside classes or outside of school. You know, that's how I try to really engage my students, and they respond to that. They love real life situations. This is what makes TOK more interesting than any other course that they do. For teachers, well, I've just talked about it, but you're trying to sell TOK as a great experience to the other teachers, not something that's kind of onerous and difficult to draw on, but something that is great fun and can make their subjects relevant to what's going on in the world. Finally, for parents as well, you know, we want parents on our side. They sometimes come to us and, you know, reluctantly in parents' evening, do we have to see the TOK teacher? And when they do, you know, you can say, well, you know, this is what we're doing in TOK. You can send the newsletter out to them as well. You can get them discussing what's going on with their children, and it shows why this course and why the DP in general is such a useful course for instilling the kind of skills that we're going to need when we go to university, when we go from university into the workplace, and navigate the world in a successful kind of way. So hopefully, you know, it's very clear. It will be very clear to them why TOK is such a brilliant experience. I'm going to move myself back. There we go. All right. So how do you keep up to date with real life situations? It's hard work. We are all teachers. We're very, very busy, you know. Well, I've mentioned the newsletter. You've got a link there to take to the newsletter. Actually, I will follow it. Let's have a quick look at a newsletter that I published at the end of last year. I think this is October, November kind of time. So if you haven't seen this newsletter, this is what you receive if you're a member of the site. So you can see, you know, we've got there the story of the the attack on the Congress in the United States. We've got a work of art that was created to sort of make a commentary on the Me Too era. We've got ways in which we use language, or what certain media sources use language to kind of manipulate us. You know, you can see the kind of thing that we look at. All of these stories, well, we link it, that you see integration there. All of these stories can be related to other subject groups, other individual subjects. So, you know, hopefully this will really excite your diploma faculty. And even further down the school, you know, let's try and get everyone involved in TOK. The role of statistics and how they can mislead us, art versus artist again, and so on. You know, there's one about maths. So you can have a look when you get the presentation at that for yourself, and you know, hopefully that will show you how you know, one way of keeping up to date with real life situations. I know, you know, we're so busy. All right, let's go back to that slide. So what else? How else can you keep up to date? Well, there are loads of social media groups for TOK. They often have really good stories. Sometimes they're a bit dubious. Sometimes they pick stories and I think that's not really going to work for us, or at least the knowledge questions that they produce. But there are loads of great teachers who do post some really interesting stories. I'm also trying to establish more partnerships with media sources. I've got some really nice partnerships going, and one of them is with the Financial Times. They're trying to promote their access for schools. So if you are a school, you can have free access to the Financial Times, which is a really good media source. It has its own biases, but you can work those out. But it is one of the most reliable media sources, I would say. And I unpack stories of their articles, and I send them to the Financial Times, and they publish them in their newspaper. So you can see that on the link there. So I'm trying to do more with media sources to show you how to unpack real life situations from them. So those are three little ways in which we can keep up to date. Okay, how else can we help? How else do we try and help our members? As I've said, my lessons are all driven by the very latest real life situation. So all members can draw on the 72 main lessons that I have, and they are up to date and constantly being updated. I also have lots and lots of 10-minute TOK lessons, which are for TOK teachers and for non-TOK teachers, and they're normally based on a little 3 or 4 minute video that you might find in Big Think and The Atlantic and other I hope good media sources, with some questions and activities related to them. The premium newsletters, as I've mentioned, I've given you a link to that, is the key way of keeping up to date with real life situations and can help your faculty to keep up to date. I also I'm going to follow another link here. The stories that I put in the newsletter, I then put on the site. Okay, so you can see here, I publish these exploration points. So if we go to this page of the site here, history and perspectives, you'll see various things on how we can approach history, or how we can try and understand how our perspectives shape the way we understand history. And then there's a blue bit down here, which takes you to a little document, and I've got one of these for every single aspect of the course. So we've got some quotes there on thinkers. We've got the key concepts and how they link to this aspect of the course, a few TED Talks, and here we've got the real life situations as reported in a whole bunch of different media sources. Financial Times again there, Aeon, which is a fantastic source, Al Jazeera, History Today, and you've got there a little description of what it is, of the story. You've got the key ideas and keywords, very powerful tool there for students. What else it links to in the course apart from history, and then there's some suggestions on how to unpack that particular real life situation, that particular media source. And you can see there's quite a lot there. These are things that you can use yourself in lessons, or your students can use when they come to do the exhibition or the or the essay. You know, maybe they've decided on an IA prompt that links to perspectives. They want to, well, actually, it wouldn't really work for that because it's an area of knowledge. This would work better for the essay. Maybe they're doing a question that looks at perspectives, but we have these for the themes, for the optional themes, and for the core themes as well. Okay. All right, so let's kind of finish this off. We are nearly there. It's 10 to 12, so it's getting close to lunch again. And I've just got a couple more things to say. If you want any information, then you can get in touch with me. I'm pitching. I'm sort of trying to promote this because we've just published some videos, some little explainer videos on TOK, different aspects of TOK. We haven't yet got one for real life situations, but I will be adding one about real life situations. So you can follow that link again for yourself to see these little animated videos. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. And actually there are loads and loads of videos. There's about 120 videos or so that do focus on real life situations. So, you know, you can see the kind of things that we put into our course at theoryofknowledge.net. And there's also a link to take you to the other webinar recordings. Finally, I'd just like to mention, this is something that I've been asked about a lot by teachers and by members. A lot of people have been looking for a kind of pre-TOK course, a course that could be used for students that aren't yet in DP, either, I don't know, MYP students or IGCSE students. Now, as you know, we should not be teaching TOK outside of those 100 hours, but there's nothing to stop us from introducing them to ideas, critical thinking, etc., etc. So I've designed a new course, which I haven't yet finished. It's going to be launched on the 1st of May. And it's 12 lessons on, well, I'm calling it thinking for yourself. You know, you can see the lesson, the introductory lesson there, and that will explain the reason for that title. Okay, so that's a little sneak peek at that. That's the webinar. It seems like my internet is dying, so perhaps I'm going to stop sharing I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I hope that I'm still around. Okay, so I'm able to take a few questions, although I think I'm. This is very strange. I've kind of frozen. All right, so I'm actually not going to take questions because I think my internet actually is giving up the ghost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at the questions in my own time, and I'm going to send out responses to these in the debrief email, and hopefully that will answer all of the questions that you've got. If you do have anything else you'd like to ask, then get in touch with me. You can send me questions via email, and I will respond to them. It's been a real pleasure again connecting with you, and I hope to see you at the next webinar, which will be looking at the N21 titles. So you can find out more about that on the site. Many thanks, and it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.